My name is Josh Kavensky. I'm a co-host of the TPM Social Club podcast, and I'm here with Joe Ragazzo. How's it going, Joe?
It's going great, Josh. How you doing?
I'm good. We have a really exciting episode today. I think we have the perfect guest to talk about MAHA, Madeline Peltz. We went over a lot, but what do you think, Joe? How do you feel about it?
I thought it was really fascinating. It was the first time that I've had a chance to speak to someone who's kind of, I don't know if embedded would be the embedded maybe is too strong, but basically has been, on the spot talking to people in the MAHA scene, understanding their concerns, and able to discuss them as a nuanced group of people who have varied concerns and not discuss them as some sort of kind of I don't know not judge them all the same. It's a nuanced group and
Yeah.
there's a lot of interesting stuff, and I think that's what's most interesting about Maha is kind of like, and you said you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater with a lot of this stuff.
That's a good point because I think like what's funny about Maha to me and the related movements is like there is this like carnival freak show thing going on where like there's like the Liver King on social media, the guy who eats like raw liver all the time, or like all these people doing these like crazy stunts related to food or health. Like it does sort of feel like you're in this like online like circus. But she did a really good job of like talking about them as humans and not
Yeah,
as like spectacles. Yeah.
and I think what was especially interesting is talking about some of the, I don't know, you like the high priests of
Yeah.
the movement, not the people, not the boots on the ground, but kind of like the evangelizers, the grifters, the means. Couple she spoke of, a couple others, and that was really interesting because you see some of these people, but I'm not familiar with all of them. I don't know how the whole thing fits together. So it was awesome to have Madeline kind of like connect the dots. Another thing that I thought was super interesting was just talking about like, where did this come from? Like, how did this
Hmm.
group coalesce, and just how important it really, like, COVID and the vaccine stuff is at the center of everything.
Totally. And she made this super interesting point that because COVID was all kind of about individual responsibility, it's like everybody had to like take on the burden for solving the
Hmm.
pandemic themselves, which can make sense, right? With like through their own behavior, that like kind of inspired people in a way to like go down this like insane, these like wild rabbit holes around like what was okay and what wasn't okay,
Yeah.
with like really horrible ramifications for everybody else.
Yeah, and I think, like, honestly, there's another implication there, which is, I mean, this is why we have public safety and public health, is because it's really difficult, borderline, I would say insane, to have it incumbent upon individuals to be able to like navigate all health decisions. Like, we're
Yeah.
not chemists. We're not biologists. We don't understand how like all foods interact with the body. Like, that's why you have trained professionals who have devoted their life to understanding these things, and we're supposed to listen to them. And so, yeah, I think you have a bunch of people cooped up, kind of told they, figure it out, and then they figured it out to their own detriment in a lot of cases.
Totally. It also reminds me of how, like, when people from foreign countries come to the US for the first time, they're always shocked to see pharmaceuticals being advertised, like on TV or anywhere else. Because in most countries, that's like illegal. And the idea is that the doctor tells you like what you're going to take. And so the idea that you like turn on the TV and there's like an advertisement for five different competing like antidepressants or like weight loss drugs or like whatever, or like any kind of medication for any
Yeah.
kind of health issue is just like wild. And they kind of, I think MAHA in some ways like makes sense as something as like being downstream of that. Like,
Yeah.
if
It's
you can
funny you
like
mentioned
shop.
that.
Yeah.
I had my cousin was over. I'll take a little digress. My cousin was over and one of these commercials came on, and it was about restless leg syndrome. And I felt like such a dick because I was like, man, these commercials with this medicine, it's like they're just making stuff up. Like, come on, like restless leg syndrome. And he's like, man, I have restless leg syndrome. It's a real thing. I was like, all right, all right, all right. So, I don't know. I think at some point it's like the, I don't know, sort of like a boy who cried wolf things. Like, I see so many of these things that seem like nonsense. Now I'm starting to dismiss the real problems.
Yeah.
Maybe it's why these things shouldn't be advertised, right? And
Yeah.
then the
Well,
jingles are stuck in my head. That's a whole other mental health issue.
yeah, well, I'll add a disclaimer that institutionally TPM recognizes restless leg syndrome and everyone who suffers from it as
Yeah.
real, valid, and legitimate. Yeah.
Um,
This is a
on
good
that
app.
note,
Yeah.
a few more TPM house cleaning
Right.
notes on that. That's a good reminder. A lot of big things happening TPM multimedia, especially with the social club. So first thing, we're launching a new YouTube channel. You can go to it now. It's live. Like and subscribe. For a variety of reasons we don't need to get into. We're just starting over with our YouTube channel and moving things over slowly. So you can go to that. Go to YouTube. It's at TPM hyphen video. TPM hyphen video. That's the handle. We used to be TPM TV. We're moving to TPM hyphen video. So go check us out there, subscribe to the channel. You can find our podcast. You can find Josh and Kate's podcast, the TPM show featuring Josh Marshall and Kate Riga. Our Substack lives will eventually start populating there, TPM shorts, individual videos, the kind of one-off videos about all kinds of things. So if you want to keep up to date on like everything that we're talking about, commentating on, analyzing, make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. The Social Club now, we also have a Bluesky account. So if you head over to Bluesky at the Social Club, TPM Social Club, and we also have a TikTok, TPM Social Club, and eventually we'll have an Instagram, we'll have a Twitter, and we'll let you know about that. And obviously, the most important thing, like I think if you're not in if you don't work in the media, you might not really understand how important it is if you're a fan of something to like it and to subscribe to it, 5-star it on, if you like this podcast, give us a review on Spotify, give us a review on Apple. That stuff is immensely important. The more interaction we have, comments, all this stuff is important because then more people see us. And that's ultimately we want to do is we want to reach as many people as possible because we think what we're saying is important. So
Mhm.
just a little housekeeping there.
And if you like it, if you like and subscribe, the longer it'll last. So there's also that.
It's exactly right. That's exactly
Yeah.
right. So with that said, hope you liked the episode. Thought it was a really good one.
Today, we're joined by Madeline Peltz, a journalist and researcher covering the far right, MAHA, and more. She's the author of the #2 Pencil Substack and has a forthcoming book, Good Girls and Alpha Males, about how right wing media sought to capture Gen Z. Madeline, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We're excited to talk about MAHA. And I think we just kind of wanted to hear first off from you. I mean, like, where is the movement now? Like, now that they are kind of in power, they have RFK Jr., they have Trump. How are they feeling about what the administration's doing?
Not good.
Okay.
I was recently at this rally, a MAHA rally outside of the Supreme Court, and there was a real strange Bedfellows coalition that had come around this issue that we can get into. But of the people, women in their 30s with young children that I spoke to that had sort of held their nose and voted for Trump in 2024, virtually all of them expressed their disappointment in the administration. They talked about capitulation to corporate interests, sort of betrayal and slow walking of these promises on rolling back vaccine schedules. And this issue in front of the Supreme Court was like a really activating moment. And since then, there is this fight at the FDA. The head of the FDA, Marty McCary, recently resigned, and he was a MAHA favorite and caught in the middle between the anti-abortion movement and MAHA. We can get into all of that, but there is a big wedge between the Trump administration and this sort of ragtag coalition of voters that really put him over the edge in 2024.
Where before we get into that, I'm curious like where Maha kind of like came from, like how it coalesced, how it became an entity that we can sort of identify and discuss. Because for me, and Josh, we've talked about this before. It's sort of like you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater because like some of the issues that they talk about are they're serious issues, right? And they're things that I think almost anybody would be concerned about. But then it seems like often the focus gets dragged onto these sort of really niche pseudoscientific concerns that seem like illegitimate. And this seemed to all come to a head, at least for me. Like I started noticing it really around the last election. My wife started referring to people who are crunchy, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. So how did this happen? Like, what was the catalyst? How did it coalesce?
Well, certainly it has a lot to do with the pandemic. During the pandemic, a lot of the responsibility for COVID response was transferred from big systems like the government, the private sector onto individuals, right? Like it was an individual's responsibility to stop the spread, to keep your kids home from school. And that brewed a lot of frustration, especially among parents who were really struggling to parent when everyone's cooped up in the house. So and this plus all of there was nothing to do but be online. A lot of people from different facets of the wellness community, people who are into yoga, people who are into alternative medicine, people who would not normally vote for someone like Donald Trump, were suddenly being funneled into these conspiratorial rabbit holes. The term MAHA, or Make America Healthy Again, was the umbrella with which the RFK Jr. coalition, this ragtag coalition, tr- transferred its support to the Trump campaign in 2024. So that's a term that came out of that really came out of the election. And I divide MAHA voters into really two camps. There's like anti-vaccine activists. A lot of that comes from years and years of Robert F. Kennedy's public profile as the head of the Children's Defense Fund, or Children's Health Defense, and also people who are concerned about like food and consumer safety. And all of these things really came together in a way that, Trump was making promises that he, of course, wouldn't keep. But the Democratic campaign failed to speak to this anti-corporate sentiment that was brewing in some of these strange corners of the internet, and they just like lost all those voters.
So yeah, like one thing that really strikes me is like some of the complaints they have aren't totally illegitimate. Like our food is all pumped full of corn syrup. Animals are like get pumped full of chemicals before we eat them. Like there are clearly like problems like in like health and like or even like the healthcare system, right? Like anybody who has encountered it has probably had some experience that makes them lose faith in the whole system, either because of billing or because something happened that shouldn't have happened. Like who knows what it is, right? So like it seems like it's like it makes a lot of sense that like there are reasons not to trust the corporations that like dominate both food and health and all these different things. Why did that become something that the right was able to like take control of? Like why was that? Because like when I think about that just in the abstract, like it's always been the left that is supposed to be the like sort of skeptical of business, anti-corporate, maybe in favor of like a strong regulatory state that is going to like police these things and stop these bad things from happening. What like created the opportunity for RFK Jr. and Trump to become like a credible voice on that?
I mean, people were totally burdened by the disruption of COVID. So that's like a big one. Another thing, when you think of MAHA, a lot of the times people think about these MAHA moms, right? Like these like sort of crunchy suburban white women who, you're surprised to see backing Trump. And for a lot of these women, this issue goes back to birth control, right? People, hormonal birth control. And there are a lot of reasons to be dissatisfied with hormonal birth control. It is understudied. There is not a market incentive to not only study it, but develop better alternatives. It has a lot of like shitty side effects. All of these things are reasons why people were, you know, dissatisfied with it. And that was a huge, the right really dug into that, backlash against consumer culture married with the medical establishment, and channeled it not only for Trump but also the anti-choice movement. And so that's just like one example. Another example is the regulatory revolving door at HHS in particular. Like it is true that people from both administrations go into government, regulate these private companies, and then go to the private sector when the other party is in power, and then come back. And everybody's in the same social circle, everybody's bumping up against each other. There is corporate corruption in regulation. The problem is that, and they promise to take that on. you can't hide from the public that that's a reality. Like, you can't hide from the public that that's what Obama alumni were doing over the last decade or so. And the Democrats didn't think they had to address that. The Republicans promised they would take on corruption. Of course, for them, corruption is purging and dismantling the public state. And by dismantling the regulatory state, you're actually creating more room for bad corporate actors to endanger our food safety, or pollution, all of these things that MAHA voters are concerned about. And the important thing now is to channel that into a genuine left wing response to corporate corruption and rebuilding the regulatory state.
One of the things that this takes on a quality at times of like one cool trick. You know, if you remove the dyes, if you remove this, maybe there'll be less autism. And that's something I've noticed previously. And as I'm listening to the way you're describing it, it seems like kind of like a perfect storm for grifting. I mean, you have people who are kind of tired and they have a lot going on anyway. COVID's making you miserable. It's natural instinct to be very concerned about your kids. And it just seems like this is a perfect place for hucksters to step into and kind of, do their thing and sort of fool people and make things worse. Which brings me to, um, you mentioned this woman in a piece recently who was at a Turning Point USA event, and she doesn't think women should have the right to vote. And I don't know, these things just like all seem combined in a way that's hard for me to really grapple with. But could you just like talk about like that aspect of it, like the infiltration of the grifters? Because I read that woman's bio and it was like crazy. And then you start reading a lot of these bios and they're crazy and they're filled with pseudoscience and they don't know what they're talking about, but they have immense trust. So like how does that happen?
Well, I mean, I'll say about Savannah Faith Stone, who I wrote about on my Substack recently. She's 20 years old. She got married when she was 18. So, like, there's not a lot of life experience that back up the idea that women shouldn't have the right to vote. And it is like really good engagement on social media. So she's kind of like an easy example to explain. One influencer that is really key to the MAHA pipeline is a woman named Alex Clark, who works for Turning Point USA. And her biographical and personal experience has really lent credibility to her, being a spokesperson for the MAHA movement. I say credibility, like not in my eyes, but in the eyes of her audience. So she attributed a autoimmune disorder that she was dealing with to her use of hormonal birth control. And she went off of birth control and switched her diet, and that alleviated a lot of her symptoms. That's completely reasonable, right? Like, if you eat whole foods, you eat healthier, you're going to feel better. And like, hormonal birth control makes you feel not good. Like, I wouldn't take hormonal birth control for a lot of the reasons that people who are on MAHA like wouldn't take it. So that's, a relatable experience for a lot of people. And then what happens with those types of stories is an entire economy builds around it. It is simply an alternative consumer culture to the mainstream consumer culture. So when you're listening to these podcasts, you're talking about the ads are like tortilla chips fried in beef tallow, and anti-toxic air personal home filtration systems, and like whatever, like shampoo without silicone in it or whatever. Like, there are so many of these grifters. I think that the most despicable of them are the Mean siblings, which is Casey Means and Callie Means. um Casey Means was just rescinded her nomination for Surgeon General. And so Casey and Callie Means are siblings. And their sort of like reason for existing is that their mother died young, and they have positioned themselves as like insider whistleblowers on like the pharmaceutical and medical establishment. Casey Means left residency, surgical residency, just before she graduated because she said she was so disgusted with the medical establishment. Callie Means has made claims to being a pharmaceutical and big food lobbyist, which his former colleagues describe as exaggerated. Um, but he has become a special government advisor to the White House and RFK Jr. Both of these people are selling things. Like Casey Means owns a company that pairs a continuous glucose monitor with an app, right? We don't all need continuous glucose monitors. And
Right.
even more corrupt is Callie Means because he runs this company called TrueMed, which basically provides letters of medical referral for certain products, right? So if you go to TrueMed and you say like my arm hurts or whatever, they will write you a letter to give you a discount and the ability to use HSA dollars to buy like a Peloton or like a certain whatever, like, you know, foam roller or whatever. Like these companies that TrueMed is partnered with, um they're like, you know, making matchmaking with patients.
Sounds a lot
And
like the fraud that JD Vance and Mehmet Oz were out there talking about stamping out. I mean, that sounds like just straight up doing fraud. But
no, I
sorry to
mean,
interrupt. I mean, that's crazy.
no, I mean, it's like it is cartoonish levels of corruption. And lo
Yeah.
and behold, there was a recent New York Times investigation that while, you know, over the last several months, as the administration has dismantled Medicaid, they have pushed expansion of HSA funds while Callie Means was an advisor in government. So, like, it's all about money. You know, at the top, it's all about money. When you get down to these concerned voters, you know, they are not people of power. They're not
Yeah.
government officials. They don't own businesses. They just want to see their kids healthy. And this is what's speaking to them.
So, okay, but like for the voters, because one thing you were saying earlier was like we were almost getting into like tradwife territory, I thought, with like both the kind of being opposed to hormonal birth control, but also like the other sort of like broader like cultural suite of things they're interested in, like non-pasteurized milk, like raising your own chickens. Like I feel like that's all stuff that's like associated with that. And the woman that you wrote about, who was telling people that women shouldn't have the right to vote, like it all seems like very like tradwife universe to me. Like why are those two things related? Like how does MAHA kind of morph into this like way more kind of like extreme like vision of how you're supposed to live your life?
I mean, I think also the tradwife thing slots into a backlash against consumer culture. Like
Okay.
being a worker in America sucks for anyone. And you have organizations like Turning Point USA telling you that, you know, a alternative financial situation for you as a young woman is to depend on a man. And like I'd love to like live on a farm. I mean, I don't know that that's true, but like there's definitely something appealing about like retreating from consumerism and city life and like
Hell
not
yeah.
having to worry about money, like, you know. And this is of
Yeah.
course not an economic reality. Like young men are not economically empowered to support a wife and multiple children on a single income. So basically the right is doubling down on these old standards of success, these old traditional markers of success in a world where it's increasingly impossible to meet them.
I have a question for actually both of you because I'm technically not. I mean, I guess maybe I'm a person who does journalism, but I'm not a journalist. I'm a publisher. And when I find that health and nutrition and diet is like the hardest journalism to maybe both do and consume because there's so many studies coming out all the time, and so you have to be able to evaluate a study, and then you have to be able to write about it well, and so it just takes a lot. And then there's the capitalistic demands of journalism. You gotta produce content, and it feels like that's why we're hearing something new about coffee every few days. My question is like, do you think that journalism about health is in like a worse place than like journalism at large? Because it seems like that to me, but I don't know if maybe I'm just not looking in the right places. It just feels like really hard to find good information, especially if didn't work in the industry and I didn't really know where to begin. I'm curious what you guys think about that.
Um, I mean, if you like read, like, let's say you're concerned about food dyes in your kids cereal. If you actually read like a longitudinal nutritional study about, the impacts of red 40 and corn syrup, like you're going to get a lot of results that are in the gray area, and it's not particularly interesting reading. Like what's interesting is saying that like Fruit Loops gave your kid autism, right?
Yes, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, it's if you actually like, one thing they talk about in MAHA all the time is the gut microbiome, and so I once watched a lecture from, like, a legitimate, like, professor of nutrition who was talking about, like, how your gut micro and it's just, like, super boring, like, I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. But and RFK is really like a model of this. Like he frequently makes claims about the ketogenic diet being able to cure schizophrenia and cure bipolar disorder and ADHD and like all of these sort of neurological disorders. And like the schizophrenia thing, for example, is from a researcher at Harvard who has said like in some patients, it is possible to alleviate some symptoms of schizophrenia. But what you have is like this sensationalized claim that gets a lot more clicks. So it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember during COVID, like there was almost because like I was reporting on like the pandemic and kind of how it was spreading, but it was really hard at a certain point to keep it interesting for people because it was so depressing. And like, there's this impulse, like you were saying, Madeline, to like find something new and exciting and like because that's the news, right? It's like what's different. And I think that just with like science stuff and health, I feel like that just like really quickly turns into, Fruit Loops cause autism or whatever. Like unless you're like really like on the straight and narrow, like it can just like morph in these weird directions. And a lot of times I feel like that's kind of harmless. Like I feel like I read like studies like in mainstream, like big newspapers all the time saying like, this one weird trick is going to extend your lifespan a year or whatever, like stuff like that, which isn't like that. Like it's like pretty benign, but like it doesn't seem like it's that far from, uh, eating more green vegetables is good for you to saying that like, Fruit Loops give you schizophrenia or whatever it is. Like it just seems like those two things are like pretty closely related. Um, it's funny though what you were saying earlier about like beef tallow and other things like that, because I do feel like a lot of these MAHA products have basically entered the mainstream in a way where like I'm not even noticing it anymore. And I bring up beef tallow in particular because like at my grocery store they had it for sale, and so I bought like a jar and have been cooking with it, and it's actually like kind of great. But like they also it was same thing with like avocado oil chips or things like that, where it's like okay, it's like things without seed oils. Like I'm not like into like the big sort of like philosophy around that, but like I take the point that like sometimes it actually does taste good to like have these things. So it's like kind of funny to me that like even though that like there is this like really damaging philosophy underneath it where like you're supposed to reject vaccines and like live on the land in some like kind of archaic way that's probably a lot less fun than it seems. At the same time, it's like it is kind of like everywhere. Like it's kind of hard to escape at this point.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's consumer demand for it for sure. And the market's going to meet that demand, period.
Was MAHA that engaged with tariffs? Like I don't even know how to ask this question. But during the tariffs, there was an issue that I in particular was very focused on, which was the company that owns Ronzoni, that junky pasta. They were trying to lobby to have tariffs put on any pasta that we import from Italy,
Mhm.
so that they could sell their shitty pasta and make more money. And that to me was something that I thought maybe this would they'd latch on to, because one of the I mean, it's different how the pasta, if you import it from Italy, it's literally produced differently. Like there's less ingredients, they have laws that they're subject to, and they send it over here. And these companies in America that are growing the pasta here, those are the ones that everyone's complaining about, right? Because they're the ones like with all the additives and everything. And so I was just wondering if MAHA got to that level where they're kind of like analyzing what the government's doing with the tariffs and how that's going to affect health, because it seems like a pretty important area. Like they're closing off the healthier foods that are being imported so that we're forced to eat the ones here that operate under this regulatory regime.
I haven't seen that to that level of specificity. I will say that like in the Maha media universe, you frequently the cost of living issue bumps up against the
Ah,
like the health issues because they're always telling you like buy this. One thing is like elective what is it when you go in those little like tubes and it beeps at you? What is it? MRIs. Oh my god, and, they're always like they're pushing like elective MRIs. You know what I mean? Like
What?
they're yes, like they're pushing these like
Why?
because it like helps you like I don't know. I can't even say like it gives you insights into like whatever. I don't even
The
know. Like
It's
hell?
funny because
they're
it's like so some
So
aspects of
expensive.
medicine they like reject, right? But it's like kind of like pick and choose whichever you want. Like, is that the idea? Like,
I mean, yeah, I guess like they're pushing these things that you just don't need. And so like you
yeah.
frequently see these influencers coming up against that issue.
That's so funny. So when did because like one thing we're talking really about the politics of this, but like to me, being an anti-vaxxer for the longest time was basically like a left-wing thing. Like it was like if you went to like the example I always think of is like if you were in like West LA or went to some like coastal commune, like some like commune or something, there would be like a lot of like anti-vaxxers there, and that was like not uncommon. Now, like at some point, that energy just like went all the way to like to the right, or at least with Trump. And like I'm kind of like obsessed with this question of like how did what was like 20 years ago, like kind of like very crunchy, sort of like post hippie progressivism, how did that turn into like get like co-opted by like MAGA? Like that's crazy to me.
I
But
mean,
like
it's
how did
but yeah, I mean, I think it's pathetic and I think it's a reflection of the failure of the Democratic Party to speak
yeah.
to anti-corporate sentiments among the base. I mean, look at what happened when Luigi Mangione's story first popped off. Like when that happened, I was like so upset about the election, obviously, like scared about what was about to happen. I felt like something was really ending. Like I felt like democracy was ending. And of course, our democratic institutions are collapsing. But when that happened and I saw people's reaction to it, I was really like, this is actually the beginning of something. Like, this is the beginning of something brand new. And what happens really matters how the opposition responds. And so far you have not seen, they won't release like the DNC autopsy. That's kind of like really emblematic of their approach, but it's really the failure of, it's the failure of a opposition party to advance affirmative reason to oppose fascism. Like that's just what it is. It's capitulation to the donors, and a failure to, and just like a total disdain of the base. So it's like really pathetic that that is the outcome, but that is I sort of attribute it to that.
And are we doing we? I shouldn't say we. Definitely shouldn't say we. Are Democrats doing anything to fix this? I mean, have you seen signs of life of appealing to this? The anti-corporate thing, like we've talked about, I think we said like 5 times, it should be easy but it's not because of the lobbyists. But have you seen signs of life, green shoots, maybe?
Yeah, for sure. Like, More Perfect Union has covered this glyphosate issue, which is at the core of this Supreme Court fight. I see them definitely as like a bright spot in the media landscape. At this rally I went to outside the Supreme Court, Cory Booker spoke, which I find to be a
Hmm.
particularly cynical move. I don't find someone who is like totally supportive of military arms sales to Israel to be a credible spokesperson on health and wellness. And he like quoted Martin Luther King Jr. while he was speaking there. And Tim Ryan also spoke there. So there were Democratic politicians there. I spoke to a lot of like I spoke to like longtime environmental activists at this event. I spoke to people who identified as leftists. So there is definitely, I think and there was a piece in the New York Times as well that was like quoting anonymous Democratic strategists that were like MAHA is up for grabs. So like people know that it's up for grabs. Whether they're going to be able to actually commit to it would take a dramatically different posture towards the donors than they did in 2024. And whether they're prepared to do that, I can't really say.
But when you were at that rally outside the Supreme Court, like what was your impression of the MAHA activists who were there? Like what were they saying? Why did they show up? Like I'm curious. What was that like?
Like I said, it was like I spoke to a diverse group. I would say the majority of people I spoke to were women who had voted for Trump in 2024. And most of them said that they would be willing to switch and vote for a Democrat if they spoke to these issues that they're concerned about. So they are interested in politics and have low partisan identification, which is obviously of interest to, politicians across the spectrum. When it comes to this glyphosate issue, this is a long time class action of farmers and other consumers who developed cancer after exposure to the weed killer Roundup, whose active ingredient is this chemical called glyphosate. And there is a sort of preemption issue in front of the Supreme Court. So there are state laws that say that Bayer and Monsanto, who own Roundup, failed to warn their consumers and thus owe damages in these cases. And there is an EPA guideline that contradicts that. So that's the issue in front of the Supreme Court. And MAHA was like really mobilized around this case for months. And what happened in the middle of this is the Trump administration issued an executive order, advocating for increased production of glyphosate in the United States. Most glyphosate is produced in China. So the argument goes, according to them, that this is like a national security issue. Like if we don't increase glyphosate production in the United States, and China cuts us off, it would collapse our food system. And that was seen as a major betrayal of the MAHA coalition. And it just has not gotten better. For them, like the rescission of the Casey Means nomination, now the resignation of Marty McCary at FDA. Like, I mean, it's not getting better.
How do they feel about RFK at this point? Like, has his shine started to fade at all, or is he kind of hanging in there as their champion? And there's like, the deck is just stacked against him. What can he possibly do?
I think it's hard to say. I think that he holds on to that like outsider renegade persona more than Trump does.
Mm.
And I think that people are disappointed. The MAHA voters that I spoke to were disappointed about the lack of action on rolling back the vaccine schedule. I think a lot of people, for example, this issue over Tylenol, like that pregnant women shouldn't take Tylenol, was another sort of like wedge moment because people were like, okay, this is sort of like a jingling keys instead of rolling back vaccines.
Mm.
And but I think that he has like more shine still. It's hard to say.
So here's okay. One thing that seems to be coming up with all these people, like the Means twins and RFK, is that they're like they're frauds, right? Like they're not, they clearly like don't believe, or if maybe it's even naive to talk about who believes what. The point is that they're business people and they're selling these things. One thing I've noticed with some of the like Instagram influencers in this space is that they also, when you kind of dig into how they're living their lives, like it doesn't really match up to the persona. Like there's this one guy I follow, like the Liver King,
Oh, hell yeah.
who, yeah, I love
It's
him.
nuts.
Yeah, he is, but he like, and so for listeners who might not be familiar with his oeuvre, he like eats like raw liver and like walks around like shirtless and like says that this like is great for his like everything. But it turns out like he's been using steroids. It came out a couple years ago, and that's responsible for the physique,
Yeah.
not the liver. And there was another instance. I think this is more trad wife territory. It was an influencer who was like it was like videos of her churning butter and like living this like perfect farm life, um you know and it turned out like I think she had like a very wealthy husband, and like she wasn't doing a lot of work, right? So like when things like that come out, does that cause people to reevaluate like their beliefs? Like how do people react to the moments when these people are kind of revealed to be like running cons?
I think it depends like which side of the audience. Like when it comes to this whole tradwife thing, so much of the energy around tradwife is like generated by liberal women's curiosity about younger women who are interested in like rolling back the clock. I think that like for example, one thing that people talk about all the time is this thing called EV magazine, which is a conservative women's magazine that pushes like anti-birth control sort of maha coded things, and like there's so much like substacking about EV magazine. It's an Instagram account, like with like 300,000 followers. It's not really, so I think there is an element of like the trad wife stuff that is kind of drawn by its backlash. And like definitely liberal audience love to point out that point about like the disconnect between it. When it comes to, I don't know. I don't know how, it's hard to say how like the conservative, I think that's sort of an ongoing story. I'm not really sure. I don't think that this message about in the trad wave space that you're not living what you preach as someone as who has been talking about that for years and years. I don't think that really lands with conservative audiences. I don't get the sense that that's a persuasive argument to them, but I don't know. I could be wrong. That's just kind of my spidey sense.
There's something about these people I find fascinating, and I can't like look away, even though I don't. It's terrible.
Totally.
Like, there's this guy Joey Saladino who I imagine you've come across. He used to be called Carnivore MD. I think he still is, but he started eating fruits and vegetables, so I don't know how that works.
So
Um,
he's a fraud now. Yeah.
yeah, but it's just like so transparently like this guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. He was the one that would go around. If you're to the listeners, if you've never heard of this guy, um, you may have seen him. He was the one that would go around and just walk into Chipotle and be like, "Hey, can you cook with beef tallow instead of oil?" And these poor workers who are making like minimum wage are like, "Dude, what? What are you talking about?" Did the same thing at Shake Shack. And the funny thing about him is, I don't know why I'm talking about this guy so much. He used to be like a raw vegan, and that's the other thing about a lot of these people is they just go from extreme to extreme to extreme. And it's like, dude, if you really care about your health, just like eat normal, man. Like just be a normal person. Like eat vegetables, eat a lot of lean protein, you'll be fine. Um, I guess my question is, what is the relationship between those people and Maha? Like, are all because I don't think it's like all exactly the same. I think there are like fitness influencers who are kind of doing their own thing, and then there's Maha, but they overlap sometimes. Um, so I don't know. How do you think about that though? Because the world of fitness influence and like it's enormous. There's so many of them.
Um, yeah, I think there is overlap. You don't really hear a lot about exercise
It's
in like Maha now that I'm thinking about it.
it's an interesting point. A very
Yeah,
interesting point.
like definitely. I mean, if you're talking about like fitness trends broadly, like I would think of two. One is that women are lifting more for sure. Like it is much more like culturally mainstream for women to be like lifting really heavy. Um and also like extreme sports. I write about this in my book. Extreme sports are like really popular. Like participation in 5K is down and participation in ultra marathons is like way up. So like people are like really not doing well and are looking for extreme interventions in their life in order to like feel purpose. Um, but yeah, I mean, definitely like there's definitely like a lot of this sort of churning in fitness culture online.
I'm curious, like in your research on all of this, and this doesn't have to just be MAHA, but also maybe just the broader kind of like online, right? What is like the wildest like practice that you found somebody doing? Like we were talking about like the guy walking into Shake Shack earlier and demanding beef tallow or like Liver King. Like I'm curious, like is there any one thing that stands out to you? Is just like, damn, that's insane that that person was doing that.
Well, I think the raw milk thing is like really insane. Like imagine Louis
Yes.
Pasteur like waking up today. Like why? One
Yeah.
thing that happened that I reported on like years ago was Turning Point was really pushing this raw milk thing, and Alex Clark, they started selling a t-shirt on their website that had a picture of I'll just of a cow, and it said like got real milk or got milk or something like that, and it was like a reference to the raw milk, got raw milk maybe. But it turned out that the animal on the shirt was not a cow, it was a male like bovine, I can't remember, a steer. I can't remember what it's called now. And like that story went really really viral. And yeah, so that's like maybe one of my favorite Maha things. What is a male cow called? This is like a little,
Isn't it just a bull or
Yeah,
no?
that's a
yes,
bull.
a
Is it
bull,
Yeah.
duh,
a
a
bull?
bull.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was a
Okay.
bull. It didn't have, the animal didn't have udders. and it had
It's
horns.
great.
So, whoops.
It reminds us that it's reminiscent of the meme of, like, with the conservative guy. It's like, you've literally never seen a woman. You know, comment like, this is another, like, you don't know how a woman's body works. You don't know what a female cow is. Like, just yeah, it's just another par for the course.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. One thing that like I wrote about on my Substack with Michael Hayden was this notion of goon bait, right? Like
Oh boy.
after the Olympics, like all of these far right people got really obsessed with Alyssa Liu, and they were like calling her goon bait, which was the first time I had heard this term.
Can
And
you
it's like,
explain? Because I think our audience might not know what that means. Can you explain?
so, okay, bait is like bait, right? And gooning is the notion that you like masturbate for such a long time that you enter a state of alternative consciousness, is how I would describe it. And that she was like, through her like appearance and youth, like goon bait. So hopefully that puts it together. And like one thing that Michael pointed out is like none of these men are like, I'd love to be with her. You know what I mean? Like I would love to like, kiss her or whatever. Like,
Yeah, they're not trying to
be
learn about her personality.
no, they want to just say she's goon bait. Like they don't actually want contact with a human woman.
I just like
Yeah,
don't even know where to go from there.
I mean, I
Sorry.
feel like there's
No,
some
it's
weird psychological. Yeah, there's obviously some crazy psychological thing
it's
there.
like, yeah, the
Uh,
incel culture, all this stuff. I mean,
yeah.
it's everywhere. I don't like. Oh man,
I'm sorry.
That's a weird one. No, it's okay. I don't have a lot to do after we record this. Thankfully.
Well, does that feature at all in your book? I mean, I don't want you to give away anything because before publication, but I mean
um
that subculture and like the right wing, like is there a tie in there?
Yeah, definitely. I have a whole chapter about like dating roundtable podcasts, which is like
Oh,
the
those are
whatever
so
podcast
weird.
and
Yeah.
the fresh and fit podcast. So I do some of that like philosophizing around those. I've spent a lot of time watching Fresh and Fit.
Okay, I saw one recently where it was like one psychiatrist and 20 depressed people, and that was like the roundtable pod, and it was supposed to be like the psychiatrist was supposed to like cure 20 people of their depression. Fair, it's a pretty like positive and benign like application of this, I think. But yeah, I like that whole format is so weird. Maybe Joe and I can do that. We can get 20
Wait, what
people
is
on.
fresh and fit? I don't know what fresh and fit is. Am I a loser? Should I know what it is? Can you explain it?
No, I think that's like a good thing. Do you have like a wife and children, right?
I have a wife and one son. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I would stick to that and not Fresh
Okay.
and Fit. Uh,
Okay.
but Fresh and Fit is a show that is shot in Miami. So I find that like really interesting because it's kind of outside of this like political culture, but it has a lot of it reflects on politics. And basically it's like a manosphere show, a like male
Okay.
supremacism show. And they, their most viewed videos are like the two hosts with like a, you know, round table of young women, many of whom are influencers, some of whom do like premium sexual content on OnlyFans. And it's basically just like a humiliation ritual of these women. Like, they could say anything about their life or lifestyle and they're shamed for it. So that's what Fresh and Fit is. And there's a few of these shows. Yeah. So I have a whole chapter about that in my
Is
book.
this related to like clavicular and look maxing, or is this like a different subset of hell?
Um, I I mean, it's all in the same
It's all
soup.
continuum. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. Well, this has been really awesome, Madeline. But we have you here, and we can't let you go without touching on another subject that you've covered for a while, which is our friend Tucker Carlson. And you did a video recently that I thought was really good, and I wanted to talk about it, which is like he's kind of been on this tour. I don't know if it's like you don't want to call it an apology tour or whatever. And you basically just wanted to remind people, like, hey, don't forget this guy is full of shit. So I just wanted to give you a platform to talk about what he's been up to and give our audience the same warning.
I cannot stand Tucker Carlson. Like, just I've covered him since like 2017. So like the fact that we're here is like absolutely infuriating because he's not actually that talented of a broadcaster. Like some of these people are very, very talented. Steve Bannon is talented. Rush Limbaugh was very talented. Tucker sucks. Tucker sucks. Um, and So basically, like, he is positioning himself for the next phase of right-wing politics, post-Trump MAGA movement, and it's not totally clear where that is going to land, but certainly the dividing line is over Israel and anti-Semitism. And the rising energy in the Republican Party are among like severely disaffected young men who hate Israel, and the people they're hearing from the most online are right wing commentators. Many of them dip into like overt anti-Semitism. And Tucker has been really clever in walking that line. Like he had on Nick Fuentes, who is a Holocaust denier, on his show. He had on Andrew Tate, who is also has also questioned the Holocaust. He had on this guy Daryl Cooper, who like is has a I'll just say an alternative view of what happened during World War II. Um, and but at the same time, like he's saying what is clearly true about, about the outrageous genocide and, imperialist ambitions of Israel, right? So and now he's gained an audience of non-white men, and he is speaking to them, and one of the things that he's doing that I've is just like he's just like, well, Islam is like a religion of God, and I believe in God, and a Muslim is a reverent person, and I'm a reverent person, so I respect that. It's like in the Iraq war, he said that Iraq is a place filled with semi-literate monkeys. Like that is how he was talking about Muslims and Arabs back then. And Tucker just has an incredible ability to stay on top. I don't fully understand how, or because I don't like I don't like listening to him. Like I could easily like Rush Limbaugh or Steve Bannon's like mad entertaining, and like I but yeah, I mean Tucker has ambitions bigger than where he's at now, and I think he's just huge. Like these young conservative men I speak to, they love Tucker.
Do you think he's going to try running for president or some other office?
I mean, probably, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know. You don't need to run for president to have. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. He says he's not going to do it, but certainly this is a presidential platform that he's building.
Right. Yeah.
The people like him, I mean, it reminds me of what we were talking about earlier with the MAHA grifters, where it's like, I don't know, I feel like he's really good at saying some things that he knows people want to hear that make him seem normal. And then those things get clipped up and passed around, and then the insane stuff that he has said in the past or that he's saying now or whatever kind of gets swept under the rug. I mean, even like a little tiny remark like he made recently where it's like, I actually like Trump and I would vote for him again because I agree with him on the issues. It's like, well, that's a pretty at odds with all these clips I'm seeing where you're against him and you regret voting for him. It's like literally the opposite. So I don't know. That's the one thing I think he does well. I don't know if it's him or if it's his team or whatever, but he's good at crafting a persona that makes him seem like a heterodox normal guy, when he's not. Obviously, you can't be heterodox and like go visit the Tate brothers in Romania and act like you're all buddy buddy with them. It's just not possible. Anyway,
Yeah, I mean, like, I've been speaking with a group of young far right men that I'm really interested in their perspective for like future projects, and they were 8 and 9 years old in 2016, right? Like,
That's crazy.
yeah,
yeah,
so
that's
yeah, it's crazy. It's like
So
crazy.
much of it is just like built around hatred toward like misogyny, right? Like, I mean, for like a
yeah,
lot of these guys, like so much of the cultural stuff that we're talking about is like not the like the MAHA, that's like kind of its own thing, but Tucker and like the Manosphere shit, like it's all just that. It's crazy.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's. I mean, they talk. Oh, we don't need to get into it. It's not about that. It's a different podcast, but
All right.
it's terrible. It's
But
terrible.
Madeline, we're a big fan. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has
Really
been
keep up,
great.
please keep up the great work. And yeah, we really appreciate you coming on. This is a great conversation.
Thanks, guys. I had a really fun time.
Thank
Cool.
you.